Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is the Ukraine war news update for the 15th of March 2023. We'll go to our normal opening gambit, which is the Ukraine release figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats, inaccurate propaganda, yada, yada, yada. I find these indicative and useful and pretty accurate, I think, from what I can gather, certainly recently. So the first thing to say is that we are getting up to high numbers of lost personnel. Again, 980. That's a big number. There's obviously a lot of activity in Bakhmut that potentially hits with HIMARS. Not a huge amount of information is coming out because obviously these happen behind Russian lines, and getting video footage of any destruction and losses there is obviously going to be more difficult. But I think there's quite a bit of that kind of activity going on. So difficult. 980 for the Russians. Of course, the Ukrainians are, especially in Bakhmut, going to be losing a lot of troops as well. So one must also consider the Ukrainian losses for sure. 8 tanks, 10 APCs, so fairly decent numbers for the Ukrainians there. 9 artillery systems and 7 MLRS. So that's a really high number of MLRS. Usually, if you get sort of 10 artillery systems, maybe 2 of them might be MLRS, maybe 1, maybe none. So 7 that's the highest number I can remember seeing. 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, again useful. They're chipping away at those every day. There's a couple of those. 12 drones, 10 fuel tanks and vehicles, and 1 piece of special equipment. That could be a radar system. It could be an electronic warfare system. Lots of different options for what that might be. But I think it's again a useful day for the Ukrainians. The cumulative power of these statistics, if they are accurate, or even if they are somewhat accurate, is surely going to hurt the Russians, their capacity, their capability, even going forward. Okay, I showed you this document that was found in Vuhledar. Ukrainians found interesting details of capture from a captured Russian officer near Vuhledar, and I said that there are similar ones of these were found in Izium when that was lost or recaptured by the Ukrainians. Well, this one talks about the losses in Vuhledar. Trentelenko maps this onto Bakhmut, saying, well, you know, this gives you an indication of how the Russians could be losing 5 to 7 around Bakhmut. I, like some other people, I don't agree that you can take what you find in Vuhledar and apply it to Bakhmut. I think that there are so many areas of the front line that are completely different. So I would not do that. However, just for Vuhledar, this is interesting. So someone's had a look at the stats and said, look, for example, on March 1st, 100 people were sent to assault Vuhledar, only 16 returned. March 5th, only 3 returned from an assault. Basically, losses are at 80% plus and are consistent with what others have been reporting. No wonder the Ukrainians prefer to have Russians on the offensive with this kind of losses. What Trentelenko does is he looks at some of the numbers. Other people have totted up the numbers. 100 went, 16 remained. 116 went, 23 remained. 103 went, 15 remained. 115 went, 3 remained. And just looks at the percentage. So I've been hearing from various people of this, says Trentelenko, Russian officer operational pattern of taking 100 or so Mobics to the front line and then abandoning them, Mobic description, effing off, as they attack Ukrainian positions since November 2022. This Russian officer documented losses of 4 waves of Mobics he took forward to attack Ukrainian positions before the 5th attack fell apart and he got captured. He took a total of 434 Mobics forward in the first four waves. The rifle infantry strength of the Russian battalion. Only 57 Mobics in those 4 waves returned. That is only 13.13% of the Mobics in those 4 waves came back, with 86.86% left as dead, wounded, missing, deserted, or captured. The Marine Mobic survival rate is actually much lower than 86.86% because survivors in each of the earlier wave were probably battle casualties or captured in the follow-on waves, as in congratulations, you survived this time. What we can be certain of here is that the officer casualty rate here was 100% after 5 waves, and this is at Vuhledar with Russian Marines and naval infantry, given how long Ukraine has had to fortify Bakhmut before the war and in the course of the fighting there. How can there be any realistic expectation that Wagner's prison dregs are doing better than the Russian Marines at relatively unfortified Vuhledar? And this is a part where I think you can't do that. You can't map that onto Bakhmut. But the losses from Vuhledar, as according to this source, if you believe this, and I do, yes, it could be psyops, but let's take this as granted. Then because I get kind of tired that literally everything that comes out, Russian pro-Russian voices are like, yeah, that's propaganda. Yeah, don't believe it. It's like, okay, so your automatic reaction is to believe absolutely nothing. Okay, fair enough. So um, unless I've got good reason to think this is not true, and if you piece this together with the jigsaw puzzle of what's actually been seen in Vuhledar and the losses, both in terms of troops and equipment there, is phenomenal, then this completely adds up. Anyway, pretty bad. So that helps to explain some of the numbers. In Bakhmut, orcs are, oh, sorry, really, I didn't mean to read that. Russians are tracing for the missing pilot after Su-25 fighter plane disappeared from radar and now reported shot by the armed forces of Ukraine. So there is possibly a plane shot down in and around Bakhmut. Here's a loss that I'm showing you this because it's slightly different. It's an excavator, and you think how important excavators are for digging the trenches, the miles and miles of trenches that have been dug all over the occupied territories of Ukraine. It's no surprise that you see a drone taking one of these out. I don't know if you call this a special piece of special equipment on those stats. There's been a car bomb in Melitopol. I think it's ahead of transportation. Someone who's put in place by the Russians. They've been taken out with a car bomb there. So partisan activity in Melitopol. Russia are having shell hunger, as we've heard all over the shop. However, there was one source I was reading that their idea of shell hunger is like a Ukrainian boon. In other words, Ukrainians have even worse shell hunger. It's just that the Russians are so used to firing off so many shells that their hunger, they still have enough shells, whereas apparently the Ukrainians really are suffering for artillery ammunition. So Officer Laitoka from the 93rd Brigade rings the alarm bells and talks about a catastrophic shortage of shells in Bakhmut. He continues, "We know 75% of the Russian firing positions, but can't hit them. The command also forbids using specific weapons because it's unaffordable." There's also lots of footage coming out of Bakhmut of Ukrainians complaining that they have made many losses. There was one guy saying that he's got 160 have been taken out of his battalion. So I don't know how many he would have started with, but there are people complaining about the Bakhmut situation. But Zelensky and his other commanders and leaders and advisors, I think, had a unanimous vote to stay and defend Bakhmut. There are some people claiming that actually, if Bakhmut does fall, it really does make the places behind there a lot more susceptible to Russian attacks. Obviously, it does, but places like Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, so it does have some tactical importance. It's not just this throwaway place. Belgorod, very noisy. Here you've got a video of what initially looks like a missile being shot at Belgorod. And then you hear the explosion afterwards. That looks like, quite a serious missile hitting near or in Belgorod. And then there are other ones like this one. I think this might be the same one, just from a different angle. And as you can see, that comes down and explodes. But the claims are that is actually an S-300 or S-400 air defense missile that has misfired. So one of the S-300, S-400 missiles fired by the Russian air defenses tonight malfunctioned shortly after its launch and struck the residential area in Belgorod Oblast. The Belgorod mayor has said that 3 missiles were taken out by air defenses. not sure whether that's true at all. There could be 3 missiles got through. It could be 2 missiles got through and 1 air defense missile blew up. There could be all 3 were taken out, but then 1 air defense missile went awry. There's certainly at least 1 missile of some variety has hit Belgorod there, but information on that hasn't got out yet. Belgorod has been a target quite consistently recently. Over the past day, Russians massively shelled the border settlements of Kharkiv, Chuhiv, and Kupiansk districts of the region, reports ahead of regional ministry administration. These are places to the north of Ukraine. They are being hit quite consistently with Russian shelling, by all accounts. And then Konstantinivka, that is just a stone's throw from Bakhmut, is getting quite a hammering here from apparently MLRS. A few people reported, in fact, someone on my thread said last night, Konstantinivka is getting hit. There's lots of activity around there, and that is certainly being hit. So pretty difficult evening for the Ukrainians in certain positions. Right, let's move on to talk about the biggest piece of news, which is probably the Reaper drone. Now, this Reaper drone that's flying over the Black Sea, I don't know if this is footage from the exact incident yesterday. There is a long history of Russians playing games in the air with US stuff, with European stuff. So in the last 24 hours, a refueling tank has been escorted out of, I think, Estonian airspace or nearby by a German and an RAF Eurofighter or Eurofighters. So this kind of stuff happens all the time. But the issue with this one is that a drone was actually knocked out of the sky, and people are trying to work out exactly what happened. The American line at the moment, and you don't know whether this is PSYOPs itself, is that it was actually incompetence of the Russian pilot who knocked it. And actually, there's an image. This shows you what they think happened. Okay, so this is a significant drone, right? It has tech on board that the Russians would like to get hold of. But it was, I think, doing recon over the Black Sea. It has now been knocked out of the sky. The question is, was it accidental? Was it on purpose? And either way, what should the American reaction be?
Happened today. A Russian jet approached from the rear, dumping fuel. U.S. officials believe it meant to come up in front of the drone so it would fly into the fuel cloud, but pulled up too soon and clipped the drone's propeller, which is located in the rear. The drone's controllers could do nothing but let it glide into the sea. For more than half an hour, 2 Russian jets made a total of 19 passes on the unarmed drone, popping up in front to blast it with their jet exhaust and trying to drench it with fuel. On the final pass, the Russian pilot missed his approach. Just bad piloting, one official said. Never like what happened.
So I think that's a pretty good explanation, at least as far as what the American official line is. US Air Force says that the US Reaper UCAV drone was forced down by 2 Russian Su-27 fighters, presumably the 38th Fighter Aviation Regiment, in the Black Sea. Several times before the collision, the Su-27s dumped fuel on and flew in front of the MQ-9. So that was out pretty soon. US military official who watched video of the drone incident tells me contact was not a controlled tap. The Russian pilot was barreling toward the drone, out of control, tried to pull away, hit the propeller. Not something you'd see a professional pilot do. It was amateur hour. So it seems that the Americans, if you can trust what they're saying here, and there's going to be all sorts of games going on, but it seems like this was just incompetence, and they've got video footage to suggest that is the case. Now, so there are two issues here. One, what should the response be? And 2, you've got a drone in the Black Sea that the Russians are severely going to want. So the US Department of Defense is taking all measures possible to prevent the MQ-9 Reaper drone that crashed today in the Black Sea from falling into Russian hands. They have reportedly already remotely wiped any software from the drone and are considering recovery operations. However, they have stated that Russian naval ships are already much closer, and they believe are already moving to recover the wreckage. You can bet your bottom dollar the Russians have pretty much got their hands on this already. So as Tendai says here, this is serious and it will demand a proper response. But Ukraine Battle Map says that's not happening. They're already brushing it off as a mistake and unprofessional conduct. They're too scared to hurt Putin's feelings. This has been going on for over a decade. So this is really interesting. And actually, well, okay, let's finally go to Mark Hartman, who says this was probably a big mistake by a Russian pilot. It's going to be a denouncement of this and a démarche issued by the United States. You're not going to see any drones flying alone. You may see US aircraft, NATO aircraft intensifying their presence in the Black Sea within hours. Now, this is actually potentially quite clever. Even if it was a mistake, Russia will be able to get away with this because actually, what is it that the US can do other than get military involved? And that's an escalation that the US won't want. They don't want direct involvement in this war. So Russia can probably start taking a mickey or do things like this and get away with them because there is not a lot else you can do. So what some people, well, there is some things you can do. Some people are suggesting that America just says, right, this is now open season for escalation in terms of giving Ukraine what they want. So, ATACMS, this, that. Well, you've knocked our drone out of the sky. Right. Okay, here you go. Bosh, bosh, bosh. Give you everything and as soon as possible. And it's like an excuse. So it could be that the US reacts in that kind of way. But any kind of formal retaliation for that in military, there isn't kind of by proxy. Direct military retaliation is super, super problematic. So this could well have been and probably was a mistake by the Russians, but they were trying to make it come down of its own accord by covering it with petrol, and they could say it was then it fell out of the sky or whatever. But either way, they've brought this drone down, and there's not a lot the US can do back without basically starting World War III. So yeah, interesting situation there, and I'd be fascinated to see what the official lines are today from the US administration. Serhiy Haidai, someone I mentioned an awful lot, is the Luhansk Regional Military Administration head, has apparently resigned, possibly dismissed, not sure. And in fact, Tim White says earlier in the thread I wrote about the governor of Luhansk, Serhiy Haidai, leaving his post, the heads of Odessa and Khmelnytsky have also been dismissed. It will be interesting to see if Odessa's Maxim Marchenko is given another role or not. And there was talk here that maybe Haidai has taken on the ambassadorship to Kazakhstan. So I don't know whether that's a reshuffling, whether these people are just being got rid of because they're not doing a good enough job. I don't know. But anyway, there are people those are people, or at least Haidai is someone I mention quite often. So I just thought it'd be worth you knowing that. Okay, let's go on to military aid, and goodness me, there's lots to say here. So, a new defense meeting will be held tomorrow in the Ramstein format, Minister of Defense Oleksiy Reznikov said. Today, I can say that together with the Tank Coalition, the Naval Coalition has started. The minister emphasized after a meeting with his Dutch colleague, Kaja Ollongren, and that was yesterday. So, Ukraine will develop its fleet. Currently, 3 countries have joined the Naval Coalition: Ukraine, Great Britain, and Netherlands, UA Defense Minister said. The maritime state of Ukraine will develop its fleet, plus we are building Ukrainian fleet in Turkey. Obviously, that's not a huge coalition. It's only the UK and Netherlands, really. The Netherlands will provide 2 Minesweepers of the Alkmaar class for the Ukrainian Navy, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Oleksiy Reznikov, says. This is quite often useful for countries to be able to do things like this. So you may think, oh, that's really kind of the Netherlands, but they may have 2. I don't know. I have no idea the details here. But you often get naval vessels come towards the end of their lifetime, and then you sell them off to other nations, or you sell them for scrap. And quite often, getting rid of these vessels can be quite difficult, and they can sit around in certain ports for a long time as nations try to offload them. They become a burden. So actually, it could be that this works in Netherlands to Netherlands' benefit, or it might also be costing them and giving them away, and the opportunity cost of not selling them, or there might be strings attached. I don't know, but anyway, 2 Minesweepers is useful. And then you have this. This is interesting. Not quite sure potentially this is a cryptic hint. So this is Reznikov.
What you looking for? We are waiting. Blue yellow submarine. Blue yellow submarine. Blue yellow submarine.
So there's something to do with submarines going on, and it's interesting that you've had AUKUS recently as well, talking that submarines seem to be in the news. There seems to be some activity to do with the Ukrainian Navy here. Now, the issue is, well, not the issue, but we must remember this is surely going to be a long-term thing. The Ukrainians can't get their navy through the Bosphorus Straits into the Black Sea. So their navy can't be brought, whatever happens, however many ships they've been given, and whether something's going on with submarines. It appears, because I don't think a submarine could get through the Bosphorus Straits, it appears that what Ukraine have got in the Black Sea is what they've got, and anything else that gets agreed with the coalition will have to remain outside of the Black Sea for the foreseeable future until the war is over. So this might be really good for the Ukraine going forward, the long-term military strategy that they have in terms of their defense going forward, but I don't think it's going to have much of an impact on the war at the moment, but I could be wrong. Iceland's PM has visited Kiev, meets with Zelensky. According to the brief, Zelensky thanked Prime Minister Katrin Jakobsdottir for Iceland's continued political, financial, and humanitarian support for Ukraine since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion. Then we're back on two planes, MiG-29s. Poland may send Soviet-era MiG-29s in the coming weeks, says Bloomberg. MiG deliveries would cross thresholds on air power. US, Germany have ruled out sending Western-made fighter jets for now. There was talk about it being within 4 to 6 weeks. That's pretty significant. And on top of that, Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine has reached quite a critical juncture. The senators requested, so these are US senators, requested that Austin, as the defense secretary, provide them with an assessment of the various factors necessary to successfully deliver F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. In other words, they petitioned the Pentagon saying, look, you need to let us know what the pros and cons of delivering F-16s to Ukraine, and you need to do it now. So that I think is good pressure to put on the Pentagon there. And then at the same time, Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, sorry, that's too early, discussed for the first time Israel's provision of military aid to Ukraine, writes the Times of Israel. No decisions have been made and the discussions will continue, the reports say. That's really significant as well. Like if Israel are a pretty competent military force, and if they are going to start giving, I mean, there has been talk about them helping out defensively with not so much the Iron Dome, but components of the Iron Dome to give a better air defense for the Ukrainians. But if they start giving offensive military capabilities, then that's good news for the Ukrainians. Poland has supplied more medical aid to newly formed AFU brigades in preparation for the upcoming offensive. First aid kits, turnstiles, medical care kits, 8 newly formed Special Guardian of the Offensive Brigades. These brigades are formed to strengthen the defence and are being trained to take part. So you've got these are the people that I believe are going to the Offensive Guard, who are going to go into the liberated areas after the counteroffensive to then pick up the pieces and start gaining administration and getting law and order and everything sorted. So super important. Okay, going on to some training footage of Ukrainian military training in Grafenwöhr training ground in Germany. American M2A2 Bradley ODS, M113 and Humvees can be seen. So you got Hummers there. You've got that's looks like a Bradley, and just in front of that was an M113, a couple of Bradleys there. So yeah, good to see them using all these kits in a combined arms manner, as we are being told that they are training. And here, Ukrainian crews are learning to master the M1 Abrams tank. So they are training on the Abrams. It is assumed that somewhere in the coming days or weeks, this training will be finished. Brilliant stuff for the Ukrainians. I don't know how quickly these Abrams tanks are going to be able to get to the front line. There was talk about it being next year, not this year. I don't know if that's changed. And here we have training. This is the first. The reason I've included this is it's the first time I've seen training on the AMX. I've been wondering when they're going to get these AMX and how many. Actually, no report says Ukrainian military training on the AMX 10RC. So these are the wheeled. Some people call them light tanks, armored fighting vehicles. They have kind of a decent, is it 105 millimeter barrel. There are different stories about the number that will be supplied, but likely between 30 and 40, while there are also stories that this can possibly be increased to a maximum of 100 based on their performance. And indeed, more training videos of people on board the AMX. So there you go, just they certainly don't look like the biggest of vehicles inside, do they? And there they are. It's just six wheels, pretty small bits of kit, but they pack a punch and will be pretty quick to scoot around. So, yeah, a useful addition to the Ukrainian armed forces there. They're being trained on them, so that's all good news. Right, let's get on to a little bit of geopolitics. There's not too much. First thing, and I don't really know what to make of this. So Russia's assets accumulation abroad has hit a record. Russia has saved a third of its $227 billion windfall from commodity exports abroad last year, according to Bloomberg. Due to Europe's delay targeting Russia's energy sector, Russia accumulated one of the largest current account surpluses in its history. Now, I don't know what this really says and whether this is good, bad, X or Y. What I understand by this is that the Russians have a shed load of money outside of Russia. And I don't know whether much of that is frozen, whether this includes frozen stuff, whether they can access this, how liquid it is, how much it can be used to support the war effort. I'm just a little bit confused. I'm sure other people can put me straight on this. So I checked out this CPR document, Economic Consequences of War in Search of Russia's Foreign Assets. This came out a month ago. So since the beginning of the hostilities, and is not necessarily connected to the Bloomberg piece, Russia has posted a series of unprecedentedly high current account surpluses. The column estimates that during the first half of 2022, the Russian private sector accumulated approximately $100 billion in foreign assets. Up to June 2022, the largest part of these funds was located in sanctioning jurisdictions. So that means in geographical places that have got sanctions on Russia, evidence of the difficulty in finding alternatives to the Western financial system. The authors also identify a smaller but non-negligible share of funds in other jurisdictions. So just looking at some of the details here, we go, so this is figure 4, cross-border banking liabilities to Russia, stock in US billions. You can see that an awful lot, so this is since the blue is the 31st of December 2021, so before the war, and then in the white is 6 months in, so June 2022. There's still a lot of difference from then until now, of course, but you can see that suddenly Belgium had a load of money, suddenly the US had a load more money, Luxembourg as well to some degree, but Belgium's a big one, and we've actually heard that Belgium have put like a record amount of Russian money into frozen status. So, yeah, just trying to join the dots here, not quite sure. Over the first half of 2022, locational banking statistics data show a large increase in the stock of Russian deposits in the Euro banking area systems. The bulk of this increase took place in Belgium, where Russian deposits jumped from less than $10 billion to over $70 billion. Russian deposits in the rest of the Euro area increased by $14 billion. While the BIS does not report data for all Euro area countries, bilateral Euro area balance of payment statistics confirm that during the first half of 2022, and especially in the second quarter, banking sector deposit liabilities vis-a-vis Russia recorded an unprecedented increase of $83 billion. So closing remarks is, in the first half of 2022, the Russian private sector accumulated new foreign assets of approximately $100 billion. Looking closely at Russian and third country financial statistics, we are able to locate approximately half of these funds in the form of bank deposits. So there's another half in other sort of manners and means and ways. We are able to locate approximately half of these funds in the form of bank deposits. The largest part of these deposits was located up to the second half of 2022 in sanctioning jurisdictions. Given the presence of non-sanctioned entities and various types of sanction exceptions, the presence of these funds does not constitute evidence of sanction violations per se. We also detect a smaller but non-negligible share of funds in other undisclosed jurisdictions. So, there's a lot of money out there, and it's hanging around in different places. But I'm not quite sure what necessarily that means and what you do about that. And whether indeed much of that money is actually frozen anyway. But just thought I'd report that to you. And then finally, this is Michael Weiss again and Holger Runemer. They reported a similar one on Belarus, that Russia has a plan for Belarus, and a document was leaked that was the Russian plan, their strategy for Belarus. Well, now another document has been leaked, which is a strategy for Moldova. Moldova is the nation to the west of Ukraine, the southwest of Ukraine. Borders Ukraine, has a breakaway area of Transnistria that the Russians have about 1,500 soldiers in. In this article, the authors detail how Russia has a strategy in place for what they're going to do with Moldova, controlling Moldova through the information space, through NGOs, through fomenting protests and all sorts. And that strategy is laying out actually what is taking place already. What we've seen on Sunday, we had John Kirby on Friday announce that Russia are trying to destabilize Moldova. And then 2 days later, there were the protests. Everyone knows it's going on. Russia's involved in Moldova, and we've got the receipts to prove it. Now, I'm going to go through this article in more depth in the extra later that's going to be put together with what I recorded yesterday as well. Today I'll cobble it together with this, and I'll talk at more depth at what's going on in Moldova. But just to let you know that, yeah, Russia are definitely involved in fomenting discontent in Moldova. Anyway, thank you so much. Thanks for watching this. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for all your support, and I will get on with doing the frontline update.